All right, teammates. We are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the number one show on innovative teamwork. Great to have you. Looking forward to having you back for more. To my regular listeners, you did it. You hit the play button, which means you know what's going down. You know there's something about to go down in your life in which is going to make you better. We're just here to help you through the moment. As I always express to you, whether it's myself or a guest, we're always here simply to help you get through the moment, give you something that's going to last a lifetime, that's going to make it so you're just a little better that day. All right. Today, I have Mr. Jeremy Shapiro, who runs something called Bay Area Mastermind. And if you're not familiar with what a mastermind is, you are going to get a master's class in exactly what a mastermind is. I've been a part of quite a few of them, and I'm a huge advocate for getting yourself joining one, just being a part of something, regardless. There's ones that fluctuate from high ticket ones to just something that is very cost effective. Get yourself around people that can hold you accountable. And, it's so very important. So all that being said, before I make the intro too long, Jeremy, welcome to the show. How are you?
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Stoked to be here. And it's always great talking with fans of Masterminds because you get it. It's such a great conversation. I'm looking forward to our talk.
Yeah, and the thing is, what gets me about your story is things started very early for you. All right, I believe you describe yourself as psychologically unemployable. Like you describe this as, I am incapable of actually having a job because actually for you back in high school, you were selling, you were doing things in the business, you were taking initiative. And this is one of the things I tell people all the time, especially this audience. There's a lot of former athletes, current athletes that listen to me. It's never too early to start. You can create business opportunities for yourself. You can go ask questions and meet people. So, kind of why don't you just kind of walk us through your background a little bit, how you got started in business early on, and then we'll kind of kick things off from there.
Yeah, so I've always been an entrepreneur at heart. My entire career has been entrepreneurship. Going back sort of before that, even as a kid, I had businesses, coming through grade school and all. And during high school, I had my first, I would say, real business, meaning multiple paying clients, starting to build out a team and all that. And as I got into university, I was trying to balance course load and business load.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to this tipping point. And so I had a really tough decision to make, as many of us do. And I decided I'd take a semester off. I'd get the
Now,
business,
was this in Boston or in
yeah, this was the East Coast in the
just
Boston
East
area. Yeah.
Coast? Right, yeah. I grew up in Maryland, so I
Oh,
know.
right on. Yeah,
Yeah, no, there's right.
you get it.
Mm-hmm.
And coming from a family, both my parents are educators.
Mm-hmm.
To have that conversation about putting, university on hold is not an easy conversation. But I did that. I built out the company, hired team, hired people smarter than I was, who knew stuff better than I did, which is a really good point for our listeners. You hire people smarter than you and better than you.
Right,
They do exist, and those are the ones you want to hire.
right.
And from that, entrepreneurship has been everything I've been doing for the past 25 plus years, and all of my businesses during that time have all been in the service of entrepreneurs, founders, and business owners.
So what you mentioned your parents being educators, because I want to go back to that for a second. And you also mentioned actually attempting to do things as a kid, even though it may have been something that was really funny. There's actually an event I went to last year called the Children's Business Fair, where you had the parents and their children, and they actually created products and they sold things like that. Do you think that being raised by educators were able to kind of help you expedite the college process in a way? Because again, as someone that's young, you're selling things and then you seeing your parents go through the education system, which means you're obviously getting some insight on exactly what this whole college thing is. So it's not like it's new to you. What do you, because the reason I'm asking is because a lot of kids aren't exposed to that, or they don't maybe recognize the effect that their parents have on them or a guardian has on them and things like that.
Yeah, it's a really good question because we are a product of our upbringing in many ways,
Exactly.
right? So many entrepreneurs you'll talk to, or some will share with you, they grew up in an entrepreneurial family, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. My dad ran his own business. I mean, I would joke around and tell people, my room was like the Under Armour, new guys on the block. My sister was like Reebok, and my parents was like Nike, the big guys. So it was sometimes there would be some weekends where it'd be like a damn factory in there where everyone was on their laptop just working, doing things, man.
Yeah. Well, if you're surrounded by it, then you
Yeah,
don't know anything different than that.
yeah.
And I think for most people, growing up, you're sort of on that conveyor belt of
Uh-huh.
school to college to internships to jobs to career to retirement to,
Mhm.
that's it. Um, and to do something different, to veer off that,
Hmm.
that's usually where you become, the select weirdo who's doing something different.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing, but it means there's that social pull back in to return to the norm to do what everyone else is doing.
Hmm.
So especially sort of leaving that formal education environment to do my own thing that was different than anybody else I knew, isn't the easy path. But looking back, I find the most formative, the best life experiences
Hmm.
never come from making the easy decision. They always come from choosing to put in the work and choosing to do the hard thing and
Right.
choosing to take on a challenge.
Right.
Those are where those really core memories and life-changing experiences come from.
Now, one can you? All right, that's a great point. Great point. I want to make sure we kind of land there for a second because one of the things that I did hear you mention, and I listened to you on previous shows, is that your businesses were cash flow positive. All right, and this was before the tax IDs, before the EIN, before all of the stuff, the logos, and all that other stuff. You just made sure cash was coming in. Can you speak on the importance of that for a little bit? Because nowadays, again, we don't have education in the school system that teaches people just how to run a business. That's not, you got to go out and learn on your own. And a lot of people do those things and they think they're in business, but they spend so much money on this that the cash flow, they have the nicest logo, the tax IDs are, everything is straight. But again, there's no cash flow. And then they run into a problem.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think there's something about entrepreneurs that often leans towards being a perfectionist,
Yes.
right? And that typically comes, I believe, from if you're going out there and putting your name on something,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's your baby, that's your pride, that's your joy, that's your personal brand. And
Right.
so we want things to be perfect. We set a very, very high bar for ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's not a bad thing. But when perfectionism gets in the way of actually launching and doing something, that's when we start, to see a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always been a huge proponent of MVPs or minimum viable products. Figure out what is it you can do to deliver some value such that you can be compensated for that. You can always build on that later. So all of my businesses from day one have been cash flow positive. And one of the stories I like to share is we had a business and I had an idea for a course we wanted to offer. Well, we didn't know how the market would feel about that. So you throw up a sales page for it, you get some marketing out there and let folks sign up for it, right? We
Right.
put a date on the calendar, draw a line in the sand, and people see that and they signed up for the course.
Right.
Good. That was sort of a checkpoint. If we didn't get that many enrollments or that many signups, there was no, there's no down besides maybe like opportunity cost, but we hadn't paid for an event venue yet. We hadn't really paid for marketing. It was
Right.
just a matter of testing the waters.
Mm-hmm.
So that was our first checkpoint. So now we've got to actually produce the event. Well, that's good. We've already got cash in the bank from registrations for a future event.
Okay.
We now prepare for, put the course program together, the binder, the materials, all the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so we run our day of event. Now at the event, we had the idea to put together a little promo of do you also want to buy like the actual content, like the
Right.
recordings from the event?
Yeah.
Just seeing if there's value in that. So we go and we test market that, and a lot of folks in the room wanted to
Uh-huh.
buy the
Right.
course. Well, the funds that came in from that covered the costs of the editing, the production, creating, shipping, and fulfilling that.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, now we had a course we could sell. So now we go and we try selling that course,
Mm-hmm.
right? And again, we get sales from that, and that covers the cost of production of fulfilling those orders.
Right.
And then that went on to the idea of, well, let's create more live events and so on. So there's this like snowball effect,
Mm-hmm.
but each step of the way is a quality control gate. Are you doing the right thing? Is your messaging on track?
Right.
Because we've also had things over the years. You
Right.
put it out there and it's a flop. No one's interested. No one wants to buy.
Right.
Well, I sure as heck want to figure that out earlier on before you've invested all the time and energy in putting together the entire program that nobody wants. So the
Right.
earlier you can test market your idea and actually get sales and deliver the baseline of value,
Mm-hmm.
the sooner you can validate your idea and then
Right.
incrementally build on that or
Right.
adjust course.
Right. Now, when it comes to creating that product, how do you advise people to figure out who exactly they want to serve? Because there could be a lot of people. I mean, money plays a role in this, right? There could be people, all right, I'm going to put something out there and they're just going to buy it, but they know it's not something that's actually going to serve people. But then there's something that people need, and then they want to sell it and they have to figure out ways to sell it. How do you manage that kind of that dilemma when it comes to, okay, what's going to actually make me money or what's going to be just something I want to put out there and hope people buy because I know it works or I know it's something I would like to buy and things like that. And we always use the phrase in my mastermind before you answer, we always use the phrase is, you're not your own avatar. You're not your own avatar. And that's something that you're kind of hinting at. So I want to give you the platform to speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a really good reminder, and we talk
Yeah.
about that a lot at our mastermind too,
Yeah.
right? You're not your own customer. Rarely are you your own customer. So
Mm-hmm.
just because something doesn't resonate with you doesn't mean it doesn't resonate with the marketplace. And the
Yes.
only way you know what's going to resonate with your marketplace is you test things out. So let's talk marketplace. Who is your customer? Well, when you're an entrepreneur, the good news is, you're your own boss. You make the decisions. But the
Yeah.
bad news is, you're your own boss, and you've got to make the decisions. So when the
Yep.
world's your
Yep.
oyster, you got to choose. So there's a phrase that comes to mind often that we often talk about, which is riches and niches.
Yeah.
If you can figure out who that niche market is,
Yeah.
right, you can be the go-to resource for that market. So
Mm-hmm.
as an example, if you were having, you're a sports player,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you've got some acute injury that's impacting, your elbow,
Yeah.
right? Do you want to go to a general doctor who takes care of family medicine and everything else? Or do you
No.
want to go like the sports medicine doctor who specializes in elbow surgery?
Right. Right. Right.
You want to
Exactly.
go to a specialist. You got a heart issue going on. You want to go to a cardiac surgeon, not,
Exactly.
a veterinarian who also sees people sometimes, right?
Right.
So
Exactly.
being a generalist isn't good. So if
Right.
you're ever talking to someone and they're sharing with you that, oh, my customer is anybody, really anybody out there should buy my product, that's not a good thing.
Wow.
The more you can
Strong
niche
advice.
that
Yeah.
down,
That's true.
the
Yeah.
better. The more you
Yeah.
define that avatar, the
Yeah.
better, because you can outspend the competition within a niche.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you brought up the word competition because another example of what you're sharing would be one of my favorite companies to actually talk about being from Maryland, which is Under Armour. And Under Armour, if you remember, they started out as selling the tight, stretchy T-shirts, and this is what they did. And I would watch. I mean, I'd spend hours watching his keynotes and doing all. I mean, this was I just am a fan of it being a football guy. And the question got posed to him, what did you do when it comes to Nike, Adidas, and all these other strong competitors? He goes, look, I never looked at Nike as competition. I just got people out of cotton, get into performance, get out of cotton, get into performance. And he said, if Nike starts to put out more performance material, I win. They validated my product. They validated the thing that I put out there. So when you're in business and as you're listening in, you got to understand competition exists, but it's about validating a certain product and serving the same exact people, but doing it faster, doing it better, and making sure you actually are standing out in the crowd and things like that. So, all that being,
Well,
go ahead, go ahead.
yeah. So, using that example, I love to touch on
Yeah,
from earlier. A cardiac surgeon does not view a family doctor as competition at all, at all. Now,
very,
that family physician might look at the cardiac surgeon and think you're taking business from me, right? So, when you're a generalist,
yeah, yeah,
the
that's
niche
a good point.
experts
Very great point.
may be taking your business, but when
Yeah.
you're a niche expert, the generalists are never taking your business.
That's a very great point because school, and now we're back to school again, because school trains you to be that generalist. School, there's kind of you're pushed in that generalist category. You pick a major because it's going to be this much money and they're going to start you off at this salary. Now you get to make the school look good because you have this job with this company, this career, and all that. So when you're running into people in that are facing this, and this is something that is pushing you to join masterminds. I know for me personally, what made me join a mastermind was knowing, look, I don't know everything. As one, you've tried this, you've tried that, you have the books, you have the podcast. I want to go learn from somebody that knows more than me that I can go to with questions and all that. So, all that being said, can you just speak on, first of all, when you started, like how your journey with the whole mastermind concepts really started, and then just kind of take us on how you were able to build what you built now?
Yeah, I'd love to answer that. And
Yeah.
before I do, I think you'll appreciate this comparison pretty well, right?
Yes.
You think back to your best football coaches.
Yes.
Were they the most amazing football players?
Absolutely not. I'm so
No,
thinking of them now.
right?
Coach Brian, I love you, but no, you were not. Senior run.
Right? Like they are not their own avatar
Yeah.
to speak to what you were
Uh-huh.
saying before, right?
Exactly.
But They knew how to help you be the best. They knew how to help you train. They knew how to help you win, right? So
Uh-huh.
they knew things you didn't know. And there's sort of three categories of knowledge I love to talk about with our mastermind, right? When we have guests who come into our mastermind, they, everyone has their areas of expertise, their superpowers, the stuff they know really well. Maybe
Uh-huh.
they're like ninjas at marketing or they're incredible at product or something, right?
Right.
So everyone has their superpowers they come in with. When our guests join us for a data test drive, they usually have some big burning question, right? There's something they want an answer to, and they're looking for an answer.
Right.
Now, when you've got a question, you can seek out experts, consultants, and coaches. You can find books. You can Google online
Yeah.
because there's something you don't know.
Hmm.
So you can look for an answer. So people come into the room with the stuff they know, and the things they know they don't know. All the opportunity and the growth and everything else that I see time and time again behind the closed doors of our mastermind
Yeah.
comes from that third and the biggest category of all. That's the stuff you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah.
So how do you find out about your blind spots? How do you learn about the things you don't know?
Right.
Well, in a mastermind environment, you're surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals
Hmm.
on a similar journey, but with different experiences along the way.
Yeah.
This is where, when each of our members has a chance for their hot seat, they're able to share what's going on in their business, what's working well, what's not working well, and where they need help. And so suddenly, yes, you can get answers to your questions, but suddenly you're surrounded by others sharing what's really going on.
Hmm.
And that's where the biggest pivots, the biggest ideas and aha moments, the biggest light bulbs, the biggest resource sharing
Right.
comes from again and again and again. I've seen new businesses launch just from those conversations. I've
Exactly.
seen new sales channels added to businesses just from those conversations. I've
Uh-huh.
seen blocks that people didn't realize were in front of them vanish just
Yeah.
from those conversations in the room.
Right. Have you ever had to, and this is just kind of out of curiosity, have you ever had to fire someone from what they were doing before? And I ask this because I remember when I first joined the mastermind, I would try to do everything. I tried to build my own websites. I tried to go on GoDaddy, go to Canva and make everything nice. And then I put it out there and asked for their feedback. And the head of the mastermind, his name is Dre, he goes, as one, you are officially fired from this job. This is not your place to do it. This is no longer your job. You're gonna go pay someone to do it.
Yep.
You're gonna focus on speaking, you're gonna focus on being an author, you're gonna focus on doing the stuff we know you're good at, but you are not doing this anymore. Have you ever had situations like that in which you just have to, hey, listen, you ain't doing this no more?
Yeah. Well, the entrepreneurs by definition we're bootstrappy people,
Yeah.
right? We get things done,
Uh-huh.
right? There's something that helps make us an entrepreneur, and that's that we see a problem in the
Mm-hmm.
marketplace. We understand and think of a solution for it. But here's the most important part, number three. We feel empowered to and then do something about it. That's why we have businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Most folks go through life and don't see the gaps in the marketplace or don't see the problems. They accept things as
Right.
they are.
Exactly.
Or if they see a problem, they'll complain about it, right? Or suffer through it, but won't think of how to solve it. And
Right.
if they think of a solution, most folks let fear get in the way and don't actually go out there and create the solution to solve it,
Exactly.
right? So by nature, we're bootstrappers. We get stuff done. We're people of action.
Yeah.
So you take that into the setting you're talking about.
Uh-huh.
At all costs, we'll get done whatever needs to get done because that's who we are. But
Yeah.
that's not always the best solution. And after we get going, that's where you want to start bringing in team members who
Mm-hmm.
can specialize and take care of those graphics for you, right? Maybe take care
Exactly.
of the copywriting, take care of the website editing, take care of the accounting, the bookkeeping, whatever,
Uh-huh.
right? There's a ton of things in our business we, as the business owner, shouldn't be doing.
Exactly, exactly. And the type of mastermind, how were you able, first of all, kind of walk us through the high ticket ones, the low ticket ones, and kind of the ones in the middle. How were
Yeah.
you able to land on the type that you have? And when if people are listening in, what kinds of questions should they be asking if they're looking for this, looking for that? Let's speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, so there's sort of two pieces to your question. Let me address the first part, which is,
Right.
sort of these different tiers of masterminds, as it were,
Right.
right? So on the high end, there are groups out there and groups that I've written the checks for that are, 5 or 6 figure year groups, right?
Right.
So you're writing a rather large check every year to be part of a group. Now, in these are typically high-end destination masterminds. You're
Right.
hopping on a plane, you're flying somewhere around the world, you're there for a few days, right?
Uh-huh.
So with travel on both sides and everything else, you're out of office, away from the family and all for like a week,
Mhm.
and maybe 2 or 3 times a year. So On the upside, you're with other folks who can afford to be in a group like that. So generally at a higher caliber, certain business size and so on, right? You also are getting some good deep dive time and really good connection time with folks. Those are all great, right? On the downside, it's a significant investment to be a part of those kinds of groups.
Mhm.
You're also away from the family and the office and everything else for quite a good chunk of time.
Right.
But most importantly, when you only meet like 2 or 3 times a year, you can have an entirely new business between meetings.
Yeah.
You miss one meeting and maybe it's 9 months between, meetings. You could have sold your business, launched the new business and sold that in that time, right?
Yeah.
So like that cadence isn't quite there to really talk about, what's going on in the business to have the accountability.
Exactly.
On the other end of that spectrum are what I call like your coffee shop or, weekly phone call accountability groups, right? This is, anywhere from 30 to 90 minutes. You're getting together with folks, catching up on accountability items. These groups are sometimes free. Maybe they're like, $97 a month. It's, pretty low investment,
Exactly.
but you can't really get into it, right? In only 30 to 90 minutes, we can't really dive into what's going on in your business.
Uh-huh.
With a lower investment as well, there's typically a higher turnover. People don't show up. If it's a free group and anything in their business comes up, they probably won't show up to the accountability group. So
Exactly.
much for accountability.
Exactly.
Um,
When it's free, I mean, when you don't have to pay for it, most likely. And then even the host, sometimes, if it's free, they're paying with their time at this point. So if
right.
they get people that aren't committed, they're not. And even if they do get people that are committed, it's not likely that they're going to last for a very long time.
Exactly. Yeah. So I've seen those groups fizzle out again and again and again.
Yeah.
People usually put those together informally. They know a few folks. They put that structure in place, and then life gets in the way, and they fizzle all apart.
Right.
You also don't really get to deep dive into anyone's business with that short amount of time, and the 1 week cadence is too short to do meaningful work on the business and
Yeah.
move the business forward. So the
1000%.
sweet spot in the middle that we found, and this is how we run the Bay Area Mastermind,
Mm-hmm.
is we meet once a month for a full day of working on the business.
Mm-hmm.
In that 1 month period, that's enough time to implement meaningful change on your business
Mm-hmm.
and do the work you've got to do to meaningfully, impactfully change your business going forward,
Right.
yet still not be at the point where you've turned over and sold a business and launched 2 new ones, right? So,
Right.
the cadence is just right to have accountability, to have new things to share and new things to
Uh-huh.
get feedback on, and lay out new accountability for the month going forward. So that's the
Right.
structure that we use. Every one of our members during the day has a chance to have a facilitated hot seat where
Mm-hmm.
they go through what's been going on in the business with their accountability items, what's working, what's not, and where they need help. And that's really where the value for all the other people in the room comes
Right.
from, is by everyone sharing. It's like having a virtual lab of people running experiments in their own businesses, and you
Exactly.
get the best practices of what's working and what's not. So you get to shortcut your way to the success there.
Now, one of the things I heard you mention in one of your previous shows is kind of running your business as an owner. And this is when things get overwhelming. And I'm sure a lot of you listeners understand this feeling that your business can end, I believe you said like in one or two ways. One of the ways is that you actually sell your business, and you actually were speaking of a client that sold his business. I can't remember if it was a his or a female or a male, but they sold it for 7 figures, and then they were able to create some side hustles that kept afloat and things like that. When it comes to the advice that you're giving to business owners, or whether they're members of your masterminds and and clients and things like that, can you speak on how you're able to get them to see the bigger picture of understanding the importance of potentially selling your business and not letting those overwhelming feelings be, look, I'm just gonna, throw in the towel and be done with it, which unfortunately I've been in fitness for quite some time. But there's 6 gyms I previously worked for that are no longer in business, permanently sold. And it was particularly because they didn't teach that mindset to the staff of, hey, we can run this, we can sell it somewhere. And all of us, if we're working as a unit, let's work together, build it up and then eventually sell it to a bigger fitness industry or anything like that. But sales can be your way out, and that can be your mindset.
Yeah. So what you're touching on is sort of the three trajectories businesses can have,
Yes,
right?
that
There's
was
only three endings for business,
right.
right? So one of them is sort of a dated model, like you pass it on to your kids. And if you close your eyes and think about it, in your heart of hearts, are your kids going to take on your family business and carry this forward to the next generation?
Right.
Almost all of us are going to say no, right?
And do
Even
they
if we
and do
think that's
they
the idea.
the thing is, I gotta make a point on that, because as a sports guy, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of nepotism. the question too is, do they actually appreciate it? I remember actually having a client who was in high school, and this is when I was recruiting kids to go to college. And the kid, when it came to actually his future and going to school and just go wanting to do something in the future, his whole mindset was, I'm just going to run my dad's company, never really venturing out, never. And do they actually? So I bring that up because when you give it off to someone that's a family member, you got to be very careful with that because this isn't a big deal to them. This is just normal. This is just the way they pay bills, and it's not something that they necessarily are as passionate about as maybe a client or someone that's on the outside looking in.
Yeah. There's a book I love. If you haven't read The Billionaire Next Door, it's a fantastic read. But one of the pieces I love in that is, you know, the research that was done from the Atlantic Foundation. They went sought out the advice of some of these multi-generational foundations, like the Ford Family Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, and all of these.
Yeah.
And what they found is, these titans of industry who left behind these massive foundations to do good in the world.
Yeah.
After they were no longer here and it passed on to the next generation or future leadership over the decades,
Wow.
rarely did it stay on mission or stay on track or live up to what that person would have wanted.
Wow.
And so that led them to say, well, maybe we create this foundation, but we wind it down because we're not going to pass this on. So how do we intentionally wind this down? Seeing that the Ford Family Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, and so on didn't really stand the test of time after the fact, right?
Wow. Well, thank you for recognizing. I got to get a copy of that.
On to your kids.
That's important. Yeah, that's a big one.
Or the kids are assuming they'll just take over this business. Well, are they looking at it as a cushy job, or are they actually looking at running this thing as a business?
Very
cool.
So
that's one of the ways it can go. Passing on to the kids, it rarely ever happens. Even if you think it might, it rarely goes well. It does happen, but it's the rare outlier, right? The second option, and this is the most common one by far, is you just close up shop. You wind up the business, you shut it down. Yeah. That is where almost all of the businesses go.
Yeah. And that's the hard part, man. I've seen that too much. Too often I've seen that.
Yeah, it's hard to admit, but you shared the examples of some of the gyms you saw, right? Yeah. We see this all the time. Someone tries out a business and then just hangs it up, right? Not the nicest outcome we're looking for.
Right.
The third option is you sell the business. Well, then you get to build something that puts a time frame in place, right? You get a payday from that. It's going off to someone else who sees value in that and will continue it on, and so on. So given the choice of attempting to pass it on to your kids who don't want it, right? Winding it down and you're just done out of business, or selling it, which sounds the most attractive? And we think about it with that lens, selling a business starts to sound pretty good. So once we're set on the idea of that's the direction we want to go, now we ask, what do we need to do to have a saleable business? And that comes down to, you love this stuff, teams, systems, management, all that. People, when you have that in place, now you have an asset that doesn't rely on.
Right.
Yeah. So Robert Kiyosaki in the Cash Flow Quadrant, I love how he lays out this journey
that people go on. Again. All right, I actually just posted this today because here Robert Kiyosaki is again making an appearance on the Move Swiftly podcast. Beside my own books, his book has been mentioned the most on this show. All right, Robert Kiyosaki. And again, you guys have heard from a ton of different business owners. You heard from me a lot. That if you have not read that book, and you're a listener of this book, a listener of this show, there's a huge problem because it gets mentioned virtually on every single episode. Robert Kiyosaki, whether it's the quadrants that you're about to refer to or the actual book Rich Dad Poor Dad. I'm telling you, Robert, if I ever get you on, man, it's gonna be a great conversation.
Love it. So you and our listeners know just how great that book is, but in a nutshell, the journey people typically go on from employee to self-employed across a huge chasm, which isn't part of that graphic, to the other side, which is business owner and investor. Is a path. But if you ask most business owners if they're self-employed or a business owner, many will say they're a business owner. Then I like to do this one simple litmus test. If you were to step away from your business for a day, for a week, for a month, 3 months, and then you came back, would your business be the same? Would it be better? Or would you be looking at a dumpster fire?
Right.
For most folks, they can't imagine stepping away for a day or even a week. Right. So if you've got a business that you can't step away from, the business is too dependent upon you. How can you sell that as a saleable asset? to a new business owner. They're going
Right.
to come in as an owner operator, and you're basically selling someone a job. That's way less attractive than selling someone an actual business.
Actual business, right, right. And that flips the mindset. I even actually heard Jeff Bezos refer to this. I mean, he was of all people was very honest and saying, "Look, companies don't last forever. You know, the CEOs, the founders, they're not going to last forever. So everything has to be about creating a system that works harder than you. All right, that's one of the biggest things I've taken away from actually being a part of a mastermind is learning that your system has to be working 10 times harder than you are while you're sleeping, stuff's coming out, while you're, vacationing, while you're not even looking at your phone or your laptop or anything, stuff is coming out that could potentially bring you more clients and bring you more business. So, the work you're doing is incredibly, incredibly important. I do want to be very, very respectful of your time. I definitely appreciate you coming on. Can you just talk a little bit about what's next? What do you see coming down the pipeline? If people want to get in touch with you and get involved in what you're doing, where do you send them?
Yeah, everything I publish and write about, and I love interviewing fellow entrepreneurs who found what I call entrepreneurial freedom and sharing what their journey is like and all. That, as well as resources and stuff we've been talking about, is all at bayareamastermind.com.
Uh-huh.
That's also where you can find out about how we run our mastermind, what our test drive process is like. You can apply to test drive our mastermind, and then we hop on a call. No
Cool.
obligation. Go through your application, see where you're at, and see if a mastermind is really a fit for you or if it's not, because they're not for everyone. And all that info is over at bayareamastermind.com. And would love to chat with our listeners about their business, see where they're at, and help them see what's next.
Yes, and that will also be included in the show notes as well. So, Jeremy, the final thing I do to close out all the shows is I want you to use your imagination a little bit. You are back in high school, man. You got people working, you grinding, you got sales coming, all sorts of things that are happening in your high school self. Pretend that high school version of you has come into the Zoom room. Give him some words of encouragement, and we'll officially close.
Get out there and do it. It's easy to let fear get in the way,
Yeah,
but you start with something, right?
yeah,
Figure out whatever that MVP is, launch that. It doesn't need to be perfect, fully flushed out. Deliver the smallest amount of value that someone's willing to compensate you for, and then build on it from there. And worst case, you find out that your idea has no traction, but you learn that quickly.
yeah.
Best case, you find out there's real demand and interest there, and you can build on that. But either way, get started without trying to be perfectionist, and figure out the entire funnel, the entire long-term lifetime of the product and everything. Get something out there, launch it, and do it. You can.
That's it. That's it. And for you regular listeners, the reason I close with that question is because I want them to talk in directly to you if you're in that situation. You got something on your heart, you got something you want to do, get out there, go do it, go sell it, figure out the steps along the way. So, all that being said, fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.